Okay, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to get started. Thank you for joining. This is Ben Corb. I'm the Public Affairs Director for the American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. And I want to thank you for your interest in participating in our annual August is for Advocacy meeting opportunity. This is our webinar to discuss kind of the planning and the operations of it, also to answer any questions that you might have if you're a first-time advocate or if you're an experienced advocate but still kind of wanted to better understand how we do this, how we function, how we operate, and how we can be helpful to you. So I want to, before even jumping into the slides, I want to thank everybody for their interest in participating. I know being involved in advocacy is sometimes hard to do, and particularly for folks who are spending so much of their time and effort and focus doing their experiments, applying for grants, doing the hard work of science in the laboratory. So to get time to break out to go and travel, you know, a half an hour, 45 minutes maybe to your local representative's meeting or office is appreciated. And the fact that you're spending some time with me on the phone and on the computer today is also greatly appreciated. So what we're going to do today is we're going to try to summarize congressional actions impacting basic research in the life sciences. And really what that means is we're going to talk a little bit of the funding issues, the sort of slides that you tend to hear about, and those dollars and cents issues that we talk about so often when we talk about advocacy. We're also going to recognize, however, that science is great because of great scientists. And so the human aspects of policy, those policy positions and issues that are not dollars and cents related, that are not appropriations bills. So we'll talk a little bit about those and how you can try to frame those into your meetings, how local advocacy works, what to expect, how the conversations might go, how we at ASBMB are willing to help you, how far we're willing to go, and the answer is as far as is necessary, and then we'll leave time at the end for answering your questions. So again, before jumping into things, I want to thank you for your time and your interest and your participation. So thank you very much. First, let's talk about funding. I think one of the things that people tend to, we dealt with several years of questions and issues revolving flat funding and flat budgets, whether or not investments from Congress were increasing funding at the National Institutes of Health or the National Science Foundation or a variety of the other science funding agencies. We have been in several years now of a better funding climate than we had been in years past. We've managed through working with other coalitions to increase the caps on federal spending to allow room for increases of investments in the NIH and the NSF and some of the other kind of alphabet soup that we care so much about. But we've also seen a bipartisan effort in Congress to increase support for science. And so this slide here provides just a little bit of that information, a little bit of kind of how federal R&D expenditures are proposed for the next fiscal year. You'll notice here these lines represent total R&D proposals for fiscal year 19. The blue line being the Senate proposals, the light blue line being House proposals, and the tan line being proposals from the White House. We'll recognize, and you'll see a few slides that we're about to do, and these slides and the data points are in great thanks to AAAS, which has a really wonderful toolkit for looking into appropriations and seeing kind of the dollars and cents and R&D budgets through history. So we're going to give them credit for doing the hard work. But these beige lines here and here and here and all throughout, those are the president's budget proposals, and beyond being a position of policy priorities, those are not actually useful in the process of having a discussion about where funding is going to go. Those are the president's requests, but the president's requests are done. They've been largely ignored by Congress, and that happens kind of annually. So really the important things to pay attention to are the House proposals and the Senate proposals. So you'll see those colors are going to be represented in the next few slides. Just wanted you to be aware of that. What you see here is proposed increases kind of across the board here in total R&D, in basic research, in applied research, in the development side of things, and even some smaller increases to R&D facilities. The bottom here are as percentage change from the previous fiscal year. So again, you see here presidential proposals to cut in a lot of different areas, and you see congressional proposals to increase in most of the areas across the board. So again, I wanted to give you guys a couple of snapshot slides on where things are now, and then we'll discuss that further. So this is the total R&D budget across all of the federal government. This slide is a little smaller than I wanted it to be. I apologize, but this is the National Institutes of Health, and it's actually broken down by institute by institute. We have a breakdown here of what the proposals are for how funding should go. This here represents the total NIH budget. And what you see is, again, you see the President has proposed a cut to the NIH's budget, the House has proposed an increase, and the Senate has proposed an increase. As a matter of scale, it's hard to tell here. The House has proposed a $1 billion increase for funding for the NIH for fiscal year 19, which starts on October 1st, and the Senate has proposed a $2 billion increase for the NIH starting in fiscal year 19. So, and you'll see here every single institute all across the board has some degree of increase proposed by both the House and the Senate. And so this is really great news and continues a trend of congressional support for the National Institutes of Health. And again, I wanted to show this as a slide that shows we're really beginning to get the benefits of some of the research and some of the advocacy work that we've been doing. The same is true for the National Science Foundation, which is represented here in this slide. You'll note here I've outlined the specific Nsf Directorates, and what you'll see is that the President went through directorate by directorate and proposed changes to the budget, but Congress, by and large, does not appropriate the National Science Foundation at the directorate level. They only go with kind of the large top-line level and allow the director of the National Science Foundation to decide where to put their funding. The important box to pay attention to here is research and related activities, which again you see a modest increase from both the House and the Senate for this fiscal year. So why do we talk about those things? Because dollars are important. I mean, you know, unfortunately, the kind of lifeblood of science is having the funding support to be able to do the research, to conduct the experiments, to pay folks in your lab, to continue the science going along. I believe that there are lots of the history, particularly over the last 10 years, has jaded science advocacy and science advocates to think that the need for advocacy has to be kind of the passing of the hat and the asking for increases of dollars. And we need more money, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money now. If you take a step back and you look at kind of to the raw numbers as they exist, what you'll find is we're actually getting more money. And maybe it's not at the level that we'd like it to, and maybe the funding increases that we're seeing are being prioritized in a way that many of us may not appreciate or want. The reality is that Congress has shown a willingness and an interest in providing increases in investments in science research over time. The NIH, for instance, has had 3 years in a row of greater than $2 billion increases to their budget. This is a growth rate that we haven't seen since the NIH doubling period of the late 90s and early 2000s. So advocacy efforts to say we need more money are working. Now I believe it's the job of an advocate to say what we're doing with the money, how increased investments are going to help us continue the science that we're doing. These are the things that I think are really important parts of the conversation. And I'm talking about these because I think if you're going to be going and meeting with your elected representative, I don't personally think that you should be having a discussion simply about the dollars and cents of things. We need more money. No, you should be talking about that the funding is going to the right place, the importance of investigator-initiated research, how science is an amazing enterprise, how the peer review process helps to ensure that the best science is being funded in a non-political way, through a merit-based system, and how science, when you throw lots of money at a particular, say, disease or problem, sometimes you're able to make incremental steps in improvements in patient outcomes and in treatments, but a lot of times science doesn't work on a linear plane like that. So you need to invest in basic research and discovery and allow that science to go where it's going to go and get the outcomes that we're going to get. And sometimes they're unexpected and sometimes they're not where they want them to be. But these are some of the important discussions about making sure that funding is going to the right places. A top-down approach is not always the best way to fund such a large and important scientific enterprise. So I think that's important. Another thing to talk about your lab, your science, and your experiences. We don't always need to talk about, again, what is your experience like? Are you an undergraduate or a graduate student? Are you a PhD candidate or a postdoc? Are you the PI in the lab? You all have a different perspective on how the funding environment and how the political environment are supporting your science. So talk about what you do and what benefits may come as a result of that. You are, if you're working in a lab that's funded by, taxpayer dollars, the federal government is entrusting you with really valuable, its most valuable resource, dollars, to do good things. Well, what is the science that you're doing? How might it impact the constituents in your state or your district down the road? What has your experience been? Has it been easy to do the research? Has it been hard? What are the obstacles that you found? What are the things that have happened to make life easier? And how can an elected official help you? Maybe it's through supporting more science. Maybe it's through other policy discussions. Some of those policy discussions I talked about, it's not just dollars. Immigration policies and visa concerns. Certainly this is a very sensitive and important issue that's being discussed right now when you look at the president's proposed travel bans, the impact that those have had on science, just the overall environment for immigration and for non-citizens here in this country. Even if you're here legally, is it a particularly comfortable environment for you right now? Do you feel a chill or some degree of discomfort and a kind of anti-immigrant feel? I think a lot of policymakers don't understand that American science is really international science, that American science is at its best when we are pulling in the best and the brightest from all across the world to come to America and do the science that they've been doing. And we have a long history of opening our arms to people from all across the world and embracing them as part of the American scientific enterprise and American innovation. And I'm not sure the policymakers make that connection. And so having that discussion is important. STEM education needs. In addition to drawing on foreign-born scientists and people that are interested in science, how about improving the education system in this country to ensure that we have a balance between international scientists and American scientists? We need a more scientifically literate population that's doing more. So investments in education, in curriculum, in those sorts of areas. Diversity. Again, when the scientific enterprise is homogeneous, the research is focused in one particular area, right? Female scientists, underrepresented minority scientists, they help to diversify the areas of interest that may that help to broaden our scientific perspectives. And so, and then also science-based policy discussions. How does your elected official use science, scientific knowledge, scientific understanding in making decisions on policies like things that would impact the environment, things that impact climate change? What sort of science and data-driven policy debates are happening, and how can you be helpful? So I want to underscore again, you as an advocate in doing these August recess meetings should feel free to talk about the issues that are important to you. And funding may not be the most important issue to you. It may be an immigration issue. It may be, I'm looking to start a small business and I'd like to see, STEM tax policies that'll help to encourage innovation. That may be where you want to focus. How you should go into these meetings. We can help guide your discussion, and we can provide you with materials that'll help connect you throughout the conversation and keep you data-driven and fact-driven. But I don't want you to assume that you have to go and talk about one thing or another. You should be open-minded in your conversation. As I say here, great science is done by great scientists, and I think that policymakers need to be reminded of that. And great scientists come in all shapes and sizes and colors and genders and and from all across the country. How ASBMB is willing to help is really an important piece to this process. I mean, you're here on the phone with us. Myself and my staff draw a salary from ASBMB, so what are we willing to do for you? We're willing to provide you one-on-one training before your meetings. So this is a really good first step. And some of the people on the call here have been participating in ASBMB's Advocacy training program, which has been kind of an advanced training in how to get involved in advocacy and what policy is and how to be involved in science policy at a more professionalized level. But we will set up training for you before your meetings via conference call, via webinar. If you're local, we'll take you out for lunch. We'll have these discussions with you and answer your questions on a one-on-one basis, because maybe you'd prefer that over kind of this group setting to answer and ask questions. So we will provide you with training for your meeting. We will also do meeting planning and organization for you. We will help you to schedule the meeting if that's what you'd like. We can help provide you with the contacts and the phone numbers and the addresses for people that you'd like to meet with. We're more than willing to do that as well. And we'll provide you with data and supporting materials, both about science, the agencies that fund you, and maybe even the policymaker that you're meeting with, kind of where their interests are, via kind of providing you a bio and some of their voting history in Congress, so you can get a sense as to where they fall in things. We're willing to provide you with all of these materials, and we're willing to be as aggressive a helper as you'd like, but we can also be as passive a helper as you'd like. If you are already very experienced, or if you want to kind of try it for yourself to see what kind of experience you can have, we will engage with you at the level that you're comfortable with and at the level that you would like. So I want you to be aware of that, let you know that we are here to support you through the process, and that can mean holding your hand through a meeting, or it can mean just kind of sending you some emails and making sure that everything is moving along nicely. Here are some just pictures of some of the materials that we provide. We have leave behind folders that are very nice and glossy and pretty. We have some infographics that show the importance of how federal investments in the different life science research agencies lead to how investments here, this watering can being congressional funding, how that helps the tree to grow for economic impact, education, innovation, public health, global influence, kind of the things that come from and stem out of investments in the life sciences. And then also we even have talking points on a variety of issues, as I said, beyond funding. Here, this one is funding, enacting policies that strengthen the American scientific workforce, protecting American innovators by promoting an environment supportive of discovery, and just building a sustainable life science research enterprise, which are some areas that we have been very interested in the past. And so these are the variety of things that we have, the materials that we have available to you, the expertise that we're willing to provide to you, some of the data points. So at this point, I'm going to stop and take questions. I do see I have a queue here of questions that I will answer first because they're kind of here and ready. So if you do have questions, there are opportunities to plug your question into a chat box or a Q&A box so your questions can be asked. I think you can even, there's a button to raise your hand if you'd like. and I can find a way to do that as well. But we'll go ahead now and thank you again for your time and start taking your questions. And so I have 3 here that are loaded in that I'm going to go ahead and answer. One asked if we can provide info on our reps' interest in science policy, and the answer is yes, we certainly can. We'll provide you with some details about your representative, their biography, kind of what their background is in, so you can kind of understand that and help to make a connection. Also, some demographical information about the congressional district that or state that they are representing, so that you can, as you think about your advocacy and your messaging, make connections yourself on issues that are important. So I think that is very helpful. And also we can provide you with a voting record for those rare instances in which there is actually a piece of legislation that relates directly to science, the life sciences, the NIH, the NSF, so that we can point to direct instances in which people have voted and been helpful to things. A second question that I have here is, what if my representative or senator's offices are already really supportive of science and research? Should I push them further? How should I proceed? It's a great question, and I hear that a lot. If you are meeting with a representative who is already supportive of the scientific enterprise, thank them for their support and let them know what their investments have been getting. Kind of what's the return on the investment, what are you doing with the dollars that they're providing you. I think that's always a really nice way to connect to a policymaker who has already been supportive. I think that's really, really important to do, and I think it goes a long way. So for some offices, it may be the very first time that they're hearing about kind of the science that's going on in their district. For others, they're experts. They have been champions of the research enterprise already, and so thanking them and letting them know what's happening in their own backyard is a really great way to do that. Moving on to the next question that I have here, can I bring lab mates who are immigrants and can't vote to our meetings? The answer is absolutely you can. If they are working in your lab, then they are constituents. They may not be voters, but they are certainly constituents of the district or the state. And so, they're part of the fabric and the community, and I think it's important that immigrant and non-immigrant, citizen and non-citizens are heard and those perspectives are shared. It is admittedly more difficult to set up a meeting if you yourself are an immigrant or if you are a non-citizen or not a constituent in a particular district. Those meetings get harder because the elected representatives would rather but their priority is towards the voting public in their district. Those are kind of their bosses, right? Those are the people that they are most beholden to. And so priority is certainly given to constituents over non-constituents. But yes, I think you should bring a bevy of people to come and join in your conversation. The next question I have here is inviting our rep to our institution to show firsthand where federal funds go. You can certainly do that. I think I encourage you to invite your representatives to come to your lab, to sit at the bench, to do some of the science, to see what's happening is a really great idea. For me, it was the very first time that I went to a couple of labs. It was just really eye-opening for me to better understand what it's like to be a scientist, what goes on a daily basis. I really think that's a great idea, and I encourage you to do that. If you do invite an elected official to your lab, and if they do accept that invitation, you probably at that point are going to want to talk not only with us at ASBMB, but also with your on-campus government relations folks, the people who represent your university in Congress. I just think that's a good idea that you should consider doing. So wanted to share that. The next question, what is the standard setup for these meetings? Lab tour, then discussion, or discussion, then lab tour? I think these are, this is a really good question. I'm trying to figure out, there's no exact way to do it. particularly if you're doing a lab tour, I think it's better to show and then tell. So walking through the lab and talking about the experiments that you're doing, and then sitting down and talking about what some of the outcomes of that science might be, and how you got the funding, and doing all of those sorts of things. That I think is probably a really good idea and a standard way to do it. But again, I don't want you to think that the only way that you can meet with a representative is through through a lab visit. I think you should be more than willing to, if it's not too far, to go to the local congressional or Senate office and conduct your meeting there. So that was a great question. And I'm really sorry, guys, that it's my voice coming at you so much, but I think this is the easiest way to answer questions is they're kind of getting thrown at me in a text box on my computer screen here. So we're going to continue down. How can I schedule one-on-one training before August? That's a great question, and it's an easy answer. You can email Daniel Pham, and his email is dpham@asbmb.org. His email address just popped into the presenter chat there. You can call him at 240-283-6641. Is his direct line, and he would be more than willing to help you to organize some time between himself and me and my staff and you and the team of people that you're doing your meeting with. We'll work it around your availability to go ahead and have a one-on-one training if that's something that you're interested in doing. So that provides the answer for that. Can we expect the statistic material and handouts for our meetings? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. Once you have a meeting scheduled, or as you're in the process of scheduling your meeting, you should reach out to us at ASBMB so that we can put together your meeting materials, and we will mail them directly to you so that you have a physical copy of them. I will not send you a PDF and then ask you to print out the information. No, we've got really nice kind of glossy materials. So again, through working with Daniel to let us know kind of what meetings you have scheduled, and frankly, we'd like to do that anyway so that we can know how many people are having meetings, where meetings are going and happening. We want to be able to just kind of track how successful our initiative is being, and so I think that's really very helpful to do. So let Daniel know when you're looking to have a meeting and who you're meeting with, and we'll be sure to provide you with the materials that you're looking for. Another question, can I just call my representatives myself to schedule my own meeting and save you all the work? And the answer is absolutely, you can do that. We would love for you to do that, but you don't have to do that. We have found in our experiences that a lot of issues in advocacy are getting over the hurdles of getting involved. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is taking the first step, and so we are more than willing to use our experience and expertise to help arrange that first step for you. So we're happy to do that, sure, but you can do that yourself too. And the easiest way to do that is you can Google your representative. If you don't know who your representative is, you can go to www.house.gov or www.senate.gov. And those websites you can plug in your zip code, and they will provide you with your elected representatives. You can click on the link to their page, and inside of their page you'll see the contact information for both their congressional office and their local office, and you can start beginning phone calls there to schedule meetings. To ask for the scheduler in the office that you're a constituent, you'd like to set up a meeting during the recess. So it's pretty easy to do that, and we encourage you to do it, but also remember, we're more than willing to help you. The next question here, how do we know that the increase year over year in dollars for research is due to our advocacy? Well, that's a great question. The short answer is Washington, like so many places, is a city in which kind of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. If we're not asking and making the need for investments known, other people are, and other areas of science are, and other kind of not even non-science folks, people will advocate for their needs. And so if you're not advocating and if people aren't advocating for the needs for science, well, the needs for another group are going to come up and take a priority. So is there a direct line where I can say these 12 meetings that ASBMB had resulted in this percentage of increase to the NIH's budget? No. There's not. I don't have that sort of data connection that I can make. In Washington, particularly in advocacy work like this amongst nonprofits like ours, what we find is that success is the child of 100 fathers and failure is an orphan. So everybody takes a little piece of the success, and nobody wants to claim when things don't work. So hard to point to exactly what has worked, but you can be sure that increases, over and over again, the ability to, different scientific societies, different groups of scientists, different patient advocacy groups being so actively involved in advocacy has played a part in making it a priority for policymakers. Next question, what length of time can you expect to have with the legislator? I think that is a great question, and I think that's also one that you should be asking the scheduler when you're conducting that meeting, or if we're scheduling the meeting, we'll do it for you in order to set up that meeting. You're probably looking about a half an hour to an hour window of time. These meetings during these recess periods tend to have a little bit more breathing room and a little more flexibility, and so anticipate somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes for your meeting. Next question here, is it more common to meet with the legislator or with their staff? And is it more impactful to meet with the representative or their staff? That is a great question. One, I don't think that there really is a difference between impact between meeting with a staff and meeting with their the actual representative. We tell people all the time, particularly when they come to Washington, that you should treat meeting with the staff as if you were meeting with the principal, with the legislator. They do carry an awful lot of weight and influence, and oftentimes are more knowledgeable at a more expert level about the issues at hand than the policymaker is, because the policymakers tend to be generalists across the board with deeper knowledge about specific areas that they're interested in. So with so few members of Congress being trained scientists, there's a good chance that the staff people might be a little bit more knowledgeable about the science that's going on than the policymaker. But don't make that assumption. Don't talk down to policymakers. But so the second part of the question, meeting with the representative or meeting with the staff, they are equally important, and one isn't more valuable or more impactful than the other. Certainly it's better, and I think it feels better to meet with the representative. The first part of the question, is it more common to meet with the legislator or their staff? In this instance, during the recess, it's more likely that you'll be meeting with the representative. The local district staff and congressional offices tend to be more constituent need focused, helping someone with a visa or a passport issue, helping people get connected to Social Security Administration or connected with their Medicare, Medicaid, the social the social safety net sort of areas that a legislator can help connect the constituent to. Those tend to be the folks that are working in a congressional district office versus the policy staff that are in Washington. And that Washington policy staff sometimes travels with the representative, but oftentimes doesn't. And so really, I think for this effort, for the August recess effort, it's more likely that you'll be meeting with the policymaker than their staff, but it's possible it could go either way. Wow, guys, I'm sorry I'm talking so much, but we're going to keep going. More questions are in here. Will the shortened August recess for the Senate impact our meetings? It's going to make it harder to meet with senators, for sure, because they have a smaller, tighter window. But we should still continue to try to make those efforts, and I'm sure senators are still going to be taking meetings to schedule them with constituents. So will it impact? It's going to make it a little bit harder, yes, but not for House offices, which kind of have a different recess period than the Senate offices do. So take a look at that. So yeah, that's short answer is yes, but I don't think it's going to have a major impact. Next question. How should we communicate this visit to our local university-wide communications and PR staff? Also, how reasonable is it to get lasting change during this an election year versus other years? Great questions. Andrew, thank you for those questions. First, how should he communicate? You can let us do that if you'd like us to. We can reach out, since we have a lot of relationships with kind of university GR folks, but we can reach out to the government relations folks at the university and say, look, our member has reached out to their elected representative, and they're going to be meeting with them on this date, and we want to let you know that and make you aware. And if you'd like to, reach out to that person, there's an easy way to do that. So I think that might be the easiest way. But also, you can look up your own universities, government relations folks. You can Google, if you go to Johns Hopkins, Google, Johns Hopkins Government Relations Office, and see if you can make the connections there. But as I said, we're willing to do that for you. The second part of your question, how reasonable is it to get lasting change during this an election year versus other years? It's pretty reasonable. Congress, it's an election year every 2 years, and so if it was unreasonable to think of making changes during an election year, then we would do very, very little. And that's, I just think that's a reality. So sure, the political process has been a little bit more broken and less effectual lately than it has been in the past, but there still are great opportunities to have significant changes made, particularly now. After the election, when we enter that lame duck period between Election Day and when the new Congress is set, that's when you tend to see some stagnation or a resilience to doing an awful lot because of the changes that may or may not happen as a result of the election. But I think it's still reasonable to be going there, meeting, and expecting changes. So thank you for that question. I see that people are typing, so I'm going to take a second to take a breath and get ready for the next question. What if we are going to meet with offices who have knowingly made comments that were anti-science? That is a really good question. I would not encourage you to go into that meeting looking to start a fist fight over science. I think that's probably a losing proposition. But what I would suggest is going into the meeting with an open mind. Some people may be, let's say, less comfortable, less knowledgeable, less accepting of some scientific facts. I found that not many people are supportive of, say, cancer. And so, some people may not have investments in the life sciences as a priority, but I haven't met a lot of people that are against investments in the life sciences. So I think trying to find a connection point, a point of agreement first is a good idea. And so that's why it's important that we provide you with lead-in materials in advance of your meeting, and also that you review them yourself and familiarize yourself with kind of the issues that are important in the both to the representative and to the constituents in the district. So prepare yourself for meetings that are maybe not as comfortable as you'd like them to be, but I don't think that I think it's unlikely that you'll be having adversarial meetings. And so that is my advice there. There are more questions coming. How do we continue the conversation after this initial meeting? I don't know if you mean this initial meeting, like our webinar, or your meeting with the representative, but I'll answer both of those questions because why not? Continuing this conversation, emailing with Daniel, emailing with myself and my staff, that's a great way to do it. So dfam@asbmb.org or bcorb@asbmb.org. That's me if you want to reach out to me directly. Twitter is also a great way. I'm at bwcorb on Twitter, so you can always reach me there. That's how you continue this conversation. But I think you probably meant the conversation with your elected officials. So how do you keep that conversation going? At the conclusion of your meeting, sending a follow-up thank you email is a great way to do it. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for participating. Thank you for having me. It was really excited to get to meet you, and and yada yada yada. That's a really great first step in that conversation. I think the second step is to follow up every couple months or so. Hey, I know that the appropriations bills are coming down the line, and I just want to again remind you how thankful I am that you're supportive, and where the dollars that may come out are going. So I think that's probably a good way to do that. So again, I think recognizing that policymakers work for their constituents is important. And so engaging with them is easy to do and something you should continue. And you can even ask the policymaker that question. You can even ask a policymaker, how do I keep my connection with you going? And I think there'd be some interesting questions there. I see here someone mentioned a comment, and this I think was back to what if we're going to meet with offices who are knowingly made comments that were anti-science. I think this kind of echoed what I was saying, which is find a link between local issues and science, like science and agriculture, maybe if they are skeptics. So again, finding bridges that connect you, the scientist, to the policymaker who maybe isn't a scientist is really, really important. And so I think that's a smart way to handle that. So I'm going to take a second. I don't see anybody typing in any of the chat windows that I have open on my computer here. So we may have reached the end of our questions, but I'm going to take a second here to give people a couple minutes to throw in a question if they have one. Now, question here, would it be advantageous to meet with the governor as opposed to state senator or representative at any point? I think it's great to meet with anybody. So yes, I think that's a great idea. I would suggest that, reach out and either we can help you set up the meeting. Again, most of our at ASBMB advocacy efforts are focused at the federal level, but we are more than willing to also help you at the state level with the governor or with your kind of state rep or state senator as well. So yes, the answer is yes. The answer is the more elected officials that you can meet with and talk about your science, the better things are in general. So more advantageous? No, as advantageous. I think they're equally important. Good question, Aria. Andrew asks, if I'm going in a group, how many people should we limit the meeting to? That's a good question. I would think no more than 4 or 5, but as you're scheduling the meeting, ask the staffer, ask the person that is helping to schedule the meeting kind of how big of a group you can bring. And they may say, we've got a conference room, we can arrange for 20 people. They may say limit it to 3 or 4. So rule of thumb, keep it to 4 or 5 or less, but be open to asking the question to the policymaker. There's another question coming in, but I'm going to take like a 30-second breather because I've been talking a lot. So everybody, 30 seconds standby. Okay, back, continuing. I'm a research scientist who has recently changed career paths to working as a patent agent. I'm very much interested in promoting science in any way that I can, and I wish to know the ways that I can contribute. I think that's a great question. I think the fact that you're on this call and participating is great, and so good on you for that, and be willing to do it. So thank you. First off, thank you for doing this. How can you contribute? How is what you're doing important, right? I think it's, I think the way that you contribute is by talking about the role that you play in the process. If you're a patent agent, talking about, how many applications are coming through or coming across your desk to look at? I like to look at the number of patents that are being awarded as kind of one of the vital signs to understanding how American innovation is doing. Are we seeing increases in the number of patents in a congressional district year over year? Or are we seeing decreases? And if we're seeing decreases, that might be kind of a canary in a landmine, letting you know innovation is maybe getting strangled a little bit, and we might want to point that out. So, I think just connecting your interests and the work that you do is important to the process, and so I would encourage you to do that. I think that's a good idea. There are more questions. Hang on one second. Would it be wise to specifically contact individuals known to vote against budget increases? Well, that's a good question. I think it would be wise to specifically contact the individuals that represent you. So if you're a constituent and the person that you're meeting with is a budget hawk, and not really, has voted against budget increases, set up the meeting and have a discussion. Again, don't have an adversarial discussion about the rights and wrongs, but have a discussion on what's important. Why is this funding important to you, and through you to the constituents and the district that the person represents. That's really important. Oftentimes what I found when it comes to specifically to science funding, it's not so much an issue of being opposed to an increase in science funding, but it's the prioritization that's put in. For instance, a policymaker may say, I'm sorry, but we have an Army base in the district, and defense spending is my priority, and beyond that, we need to cut the deficit. And so if you're able to, if we have more funding, I'd be more than happy to bring it to, to bring it to science, but, it's just not a priority for me. So being able to find ways to break through that, I think, is important. So that's how I would address that question. If I am advocating for a cause instead of amending a bill, how should I set up my meeting points? Exactly the same way. The meeting that you want to have a meeting that the outcome is kind of an actionable process. I don't want to have a meeting with a policymaker in which the end of the meeting is them simply saying, thank you for your time, right? I want to ask them to do something. So think about, if you're advocating for a cause, what action can they take to help support your cause? Maybe it's a bill that you're aware of. Maybe it's a funding increase. Maybe it's just talking about it more, or having another meeting or a follow-up meeting. Find ways that you can track and monitor if the person that you're meeting with is taking actions that you've asked them to and continuing the conversation. That's what I would suggest. What are some topics that shouldn't be mentioned, can be considered controversial? Well, I think that goes office to office and instance by instance. So I'm not in a position to tell you what you can or cannot say to your elected representative. Here's what I would propose, or what I would like. If you have partisan feelings in your heart, I understand them, but I would recommend that you keep them in check with the person that you're meeting with. Science is bipartisan. It is political, but it is also bipartisan. If you go into a meeting with an adversarial attitude, the outcome of your meeting is not going to be what you would like it to be. If you go into a meeting and talk about all of the things that you hate about politics, I'll remind you that you're meeting with someone who has chosen a career in politics. And so the outcome would be about as good as I might have walking into your lab saying that science is pretty stupid and a waste of money. It would not go over as well as we would like it to. So I would suggest kind of keeping that in mind during your meetings. So I don't think that anything should be off limits, but I think you should go into the meeting in a bipartisan, open-minded, friendly, interested in action manner, and not looking to be an adversary or looking to have a political argument. I think that's the best advice I can give there. So I'm looking around. I'm not seeing any typing, so I'm going to give it 30 seconds to see if any new questions come in, and if not, then we'll take a stop for this. But we're going to give a 30-second pause here. So I'll be back in 30 seconds. Okay, with no further questions, it seems as though we've exhausted the group. So I want to be respectful of your time, so I'd like to take a second here, and I'd like to thank you all for your time and your interest. I look forward to working with all of you and your colleagues, and more, even more than the people that are on this webinar. So again, thank you for your interest, for your willingness to get involved, and thank you in advance for conducting these meetings and having your voice heard. We at ASBMB appreciate your time and your effort, and we really look forward to working with you and continuing your path in advocacy. So thank you very much. Have a great afternoon. And if you have any other questions or comments, you can email Daniel dfam@asbmb.org, or you can call him at 240-283-6646. 841. We will make the slides available to everybody as well. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you out on the advocacy trail in August. Bye now.